So this is History 106 online with Professor Hasselman. Now this is part 4 of our Roman section of the course, and we just recently in part 3 we were discussing the struggle between the plebeians and the patricians and some of the laws that had been passed and the development of the lower classes being able to take part in government. And by the 3rd century BC, a new and larger class of patricians had been created. These are the individuals who would eventually dominate the Roman Senate because they held the highest position of state and could pass their positions on to their descendants for posterity. It was also this nobility that controlled the state right down to the middle of the 1st century BC. And although the plebeians gained the means to run the state as a democracy, they chose not to do so. Their political involvement was always based on the needs of defense rather than offense. Now, the Romans also embarked on a path which would soon accumulate in the establishment of the Roman Empire. Around 493 BC, the Romans established the Latin League to protect themselves from the rival neighbors such as the Etruscans. The league served as the same purpose as the Delian League in Athens. Rome was also an aggressive and imperialistic power, and in 396 BCE, the Romans attacked and destroyed the Etruscan town of Veii. This was only one form of expansion. Unlike the Greeks, who also under Alexander and those who followed him forced conquered lands into slavery or submission, the Romans took the conquered and made them partners. In other words, they assimilated them into the Roman cosmopolis. This was far more efficient, and at least for the time being, there were fewer problems. This policy of compromise and assimilation continuously built up the strength of the Roman Republic. Now, the conquered communities were organized by various degrees of privilege and responsibility. For instance, some communities were granted full Roman citizenship, others were granted citizenship but could not vote in the assembly. And at a lower level, some states would simply receive Rome's support in the event of an invasion. This system of confederating states was far more successful than the Greek idea of domination and submission. The Greeks sought to demolish the social institutions of conquered lands and to replace them with Greek institutions. Alexander left tens of thousands of his loyal soldiers in the areas that he conquered. He also made sure that the Greek language was exported as well. He gave his name to more than 70 cities, and to this was added the greatness of Greek science, art, drama, philosophy, and architecture. In other words, the Greeks forced their world down the throats of everyone, a process that we call Hellenization. Rather than destroy traditional institutions or culture or language or religion, the Romans accommodated the conquered people within their own political and administrative structure. All these people had to do was to pay taxes and serve Rome in time of need. In other words, the Romans gave these conquered people an offer they couldn't refuse. They could maintain their history as long as they didn't rock the boat. And that meant serving Rome. And since most of these people were made Roman citizens, they too could feel themselves to be part of this growing Roman world. And they could find a good life in their own way, anywhere Roman power could be felt. The governing in such a vast territory of land would become easier. The Romans understood if everyone were to feel as if they were a partner in such an endeavor. The simply amazing thing is that the Romans pulled it off. Now, given the Roman penchant for power, Rome was at war throughout most of the years of the Republic. The most famous of these wars were the Punic Wars with Carthage. The First Punic War began as a minor conflict over the presence of Carthaginian troops in the Sicilian town of Messana. The Messanians had invited the troops as protection, but then decided to replace them with Roman troops. A war broke out over control of Sicily. The Romans suffered heavy losses, but eventually forced Carthage to abandon Sicily altogether. And if you look right here on the bottom here, we have Sicily down here in this area, and here's where Carthage is, right here in northern Africa. Now, That was the first Punic War. So look right here, this time period right now, we're fighting over this part of land right here. Now, the Second Punic War began in Spain. Rome, so over here now, this is where we're going to be focusing on in Spain. Rome protested to Carthage about its treatment of Saguntum, a town within the Carthaginian sphere of influence. As negotiations were underway, Hannibal seized Saguntum and made war inevitable. His nation was humiliated at Sicily, so now he had his chance for revenge. And in 218 BC, he led his army from Spain across the Alps and into Italy, but could not arouse any of his allies to revolt. Roman tenacity eventually held out, and although a great deal of farmland to the south was destroyed. Now, the Third Punic War saw the capture and destruction of Carthage. Rome now controlled the province of Africa, former Carthaginian territory, and almost all of Spain. So Rome started to continue to grow over in this area right here. At the same time, Rome was also fighting in Macedonia. And in Asia Minor. So in these two areas, right in this area right here, they were fighting against there. The end result was the annexation of Greece and Asia Minor to the Roman world. Macedonia was officially made a province of the Republic, and thus the Romans brought an end to the independent political life of Greece. By 44 BC, the Romans controlled all of Spain, Gaul, which is present-day France, Italy, Greece, Asia Minor, and most of North Africa, about 80% of the coastal lands of the Mediterranean. The Roman Republic had to protect its people from outside invasion, and they did this by forming very careful alliances with their neighbors. The constant warfare of the 4th and 3rd century BC reinforced this need for common security and mutual defense. This was something the Greeks could not accomplish primarily because of the predominance of Athens as the seat of government, and the isolation of Sparta as a military power. And over time, the Greek army and navy were weakened. Alexander tried to bring some order to this state of affairs, but his death ultimately meant the unfolding of his empire. And again, it bears repeating that the Romans did not intervene in the internal affairs of their allies. They made many of them full or partial partners in the Roman world. In return, all Rome expected was support in the form of taxes in kind or a fixed sum of money. Now the troops, but the Romans still had to administer their allies, and this was accomplished through provinces. Each province was assigned to a magistrate, and it was his duty to administer government policy quickly, effectively, and efficiently. These magistrates or governors were appointed by the Senate. They ruled the provinces with absolute power, and in general, the further the province was from Rome, the more absolute was the authority of the magistrate. Now, the provinces paid tribute to Rome, either in money or in kind. The Romans went on to devise a system of tax collection, which eventually became totally corrupt. Tax collectors would bid to collect taxes and then pay a fixed sum to the Senate. Then they had to go and collect the amount. The tax collectors usually ordered more taxes to be paid than they originally contracted for and pocketed the surplus. Now, from 133 to 27 BCE, the Roman Republic was engaged in a constant succession of civil wars, making up what has come to be known as the Roman Revolution. Now, the acquisition of empire did have some disturbing effects on the social order and administrative structure of the Republic. The Punic and the Macedonian wars of the 3rd and 2nd century BC had kept Roman soldiers away from Rome for many years at a time, and many of these soldiers developed a greater loyalty to the land they were serving than they did to Rome. Others simply enjoyed the spoils and luxuries of conquered land. Such a scenario, also partially explains how a Roman strength became a Roman weakness. At the same time, the enormous wealth that Roman conquest attained became concentrated in the hands of the senatorial class. Peasants were driven off the land into the cities where existence was hard. Most of the peasants were unemployed and lived by begging. Still others sold their votes to wealthy patricians, thus giving up one of the key features of their citizenship. By the middle of the 2nd century, there was a threefold problem brewing in the Roman Republic. First, the senatorial class, growing in number and more wealthy than ever before, wanted to maintain its political position. This meant consolidating its power and not giving in to the interests of any other order except its own. Second, the urban masses were divorced from the land as well as from their citizenship, and now were giving their political allegiance to any faction that would pay them. They literally sold themselves away to the highest bidder. Farmers fared no better. Thanks to Hannibal, there was less available land, and what was left was grabbed up by the aristocracy. And third, the army was disgusted by the senatorial class, as well as by the greed and instability of the masses. So I'll repeat those again. So first, the senatorial class wanted to maintain its political position. Second, the urban masses were divorced from land and therefore divorced from their citizenship. And third, the army was disgusted by the senatorial class as well as by the greed and instability of the masses. Now, by 133 BC, Roman politics had polarized around two factions in the Senate. On the one hand were the Optimates, and on the other, the better people, the Aristori, if you will, the aristocracy, people whose only interest lay with wealth and the senatorial class. Numerically small but politically powerful, the Optimates were, by all accounts, very conservative. They were the defenders of the good old days and defenders of the status quo. On the other hand, there were the populares, the champions of the depressed portion of the citizenry. The populares demanded the redistribution of the land to the disposed peasants, who now flooded into Rome, as well as a reform. They wanted a reform of the voting procedure as well. And this will bring us into some more civil war and struggles as we continue into part 5 of this lecture section.